Microsoft has just invested 1.5 billion into actually the upskilling as well through G42. Oracle as well did the same. Actually in the region, when it comes to women in STEM and education, we're higher than the global average, the worldwide average or the international average for that. I think for me, it was absolutely, like, I'm not gonna lie, maybe I was actually in an unfortunate position or something. I've never felt that I'm actually being kind of like hindered from an opportunity or something just because I'm a woman. I received more support here in the region for that than actually, like, you know, being seeing it as kind of like, you know, an obstacle, let me say. And I think that's, again, something a lot of people actually don't realize. They think that here in the region, there are more kind of like, you know, there are more stereotypes about kind of like you being a woman cannot do anything.
Yeah. Hi, Chada. How are you?
Hi, Margot. How are you?
I'm good. So we recorded already together another episode. We talked about your success story, all the projects the very impactful project that you're working on at the moment, and you've been working on before as well. And we decided together to discuss topics that are very important for me and for you as well. So the first one is basically the entrepreneur ecosystem in the region, so in the UAE mainly, and maybe in the rest of the region as well. And we would like to discuss as well women in the sector, like women as entrepreneurs, women in the tech field as well. What are the challenges, the situation, and your point of view on all of this? So this is why we are recording a second time together. But for people who don't know you, can you start by introducing yourself, so we know a bit more about your profile and why it is so interesting to hear your thoughts about these topics?
Thank you. First of all, again, thank you so much for having me here. And it's always a pleasure speaking with you, Margot, and really getting basically to share some of the insights and share some of the stories with everyone, right? So for those who don't know me, as you mentioned, my name is Chada El Islam Benmahcene. I am a computer scientist by background, by academia, I would say. So I did actually software engineering and business administration. I had an academic journey, let me say, in the American University in Cairo, in Egypt, and then also in Colorado University in Boulder. And then from there, having basically really early on mixed between the very super technical field of computer science and business administration, I found out that actually I really like technology, and at the same time I like the application of technology. So I'm not a person who actually like would go very deep, like, you know, into PhDs and so on and so forth in the research, but I want to see this actually as an engineer applied in the world and seeing really actually the impact of it, right? So this is why early on I started working for a startup while I was actually in school. So in Colorado, I actually was working for a startup as a software engineer in there. And then when I graduated also, I went back to for some time in San Francisco working for GE Digital at the time. So for 2 years, I was actually working for corporate as a software engineer. I moved a little bit then to Europe, to France and Italy. Again, working also actually with GE. And then I moved to Dubai from there. So I had really kind of like, you know, an outlook into the system from different angles, let me say, right? From Africa, me being an Algerian and having studied in Egypt, and then went to the US and actually spent some really good time working and studying in the US, and then working in Europe as well before coming over here to the region. So this kind of like also helped me gain that kind of like exposure, but knowledge as well, and the network in the terms of business and startups and tech. And this is why I started actually the incubator very early on, around 2016, 2017. That's actually when I started in Algeria, which is called EntrogX. And I started as an incubator because I wanted more of like doing trainings to the entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs specifically. But then also really I wanted to share the knowledge and the exposure that I got really early on. I wanted to share it actually with more people, with more entrepreneurs who are starting their way through. And at that time, it was really seeing and being exposed to the success stories that actually was missing, especially here in Middle East and Africa. Like 10 years ago, before the exits of Kareem and the exits of like a lot of actually exits that we're seeing now in the region, we really lacked that. And that's something basically that the entrepreneurs were looking forward to kind of like, you know, interact with people in the ecosystem who already had that experience or basically they've seen. So myself was actually, the fact that I was in the US for some time, I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs actually who went through that, right? So this is the knowledge and the experience that I wanted to bring back through the incubator. And that's exactly what it was. So through a couple of grants, we were doing a lot of training programs. We were basically supporting women entrepreneurs and doing a lot of work in that aspect, really upskilling. We were focusing on upskilling mainly. And that's exactly what I did also here in UAE. I was the first ambassador for women in data science for Stanford here in UAE. We brought basically kind of like a lot of events towards the community when it comes to upskilling and when it comes to basically really making sure that the region is really here in terms of upskilling women and youth in tech and entrepreneurship. All that was actually while I was still in my corporate job and wearing my corporate hat, where I was in product management, specifically in the energy tech. So having worked for a little bit, actually very small, for Microsoft, and then for GE, and then for Baker Hughes, I have again accumulated an experience in the energy tech field. And when you are working in a multinational, you are by default exposed to other kind of like, competitors and those in the market who are doing the same thing. So you see how corporates are doing tech, and you also see how startups are doing tech. Yeah. And that was fascinating for me. For a long time, it was actually fascinating in my journey to always see the contrast, right? The contrast between, Middle East and Africa, between Europe, between Middle East and Africa and the US, between corporates and startups, between those who are starting the journey, those who are exited founders. And then later on as an investor, right? Also, as an investor, how am I seeing as an angel investor? How am I seeing it actually as a founder? So that contract itself, I felt that actually it was building a theme in my career. And that's how kind of like I decided that, hey, why not putting them all together in a venture studio? Venture studio is like the perfect contract that actually collects everything at the end of the day. So we're building startups, we're investing in startups, and then also we're partnering with universities and corporations in terms of basically bringing either the experience from academia or the research really from academia alongside with the professional experience and actually knowing the market from the corporations. So that's kind of like how my journey ended into founding the venture studio at the end of the day, which was around AI and energy tech. And that's basically where we are based now in UAE. We do a lot of work actually again in Africa and also in Saudi and in UAE, given basically the growth and the focus of our thesis in the energy tech. And I'm happy to speak more about it today as well as we go through.
I have so many questions. I love the way you tell the stories. So yeah, I'll dive directly into the topic. Very simple question, but like, why did you choose to do that in Dubai? Because you worked in corporate, you had many projects, but you worked in the US, in Europe, in Africa as well. Like, why Dubai? As you were saying, it's not that dynamic when it comes to building startups, etc. And you started quite early on. Can you explain? Is there a reason? Maybe not.
Absolutely. Very good question. I think I'm blessed. And this is one of my mentors, actually. He told it to me. And I didn't know it at the end, to be very honest and to be very frank. It was like, Chada, you're quite visionary. I'm like, you see what's actually
That's a very good
beyond. Yeah. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. And I was so young at the time also. I was like, I was like 2 years in corporate or something. And I was like, okay, thank you. Well, I will work more on leveraging that. I was like, I'll work more on leveraging that. And I think that's exactly what happened. Like, for me, when I was deciding basically where to settle, as in for, I think the first 5 years of my corporate kind of like experience or something, I was hopping around everywhere. And then I was actually like, okay, I got into myself. I was like, I want to basically see where I want to settle, right? And between, as you said, basically Africa, between the US, Europe, and Dubai, and actually like in the Middle East and here specifically, I had a lot of offers. By the way, I had an offer actually where I was in Egypt, in Algeria, and in here in UAE, in Saudi. And I was like, the perfect place is the place where I can apply my skills, I can grow my skills, but then I can also see the impact of my skills. And that was so important for me. Because I'm a person who, again, you remember what I said at the very beginning, like, being an engineer, I want to see things being built and I want to see kind of like, the result of it. And I think this was driving me towards seeing where exactly the best ecosystem that if I put basically in the effort is going to show fast. Like, okay, I can do something in the US, but the US is like, there's so many competition over there.
You won't be alone.
And exactly. And as much as you put in effort, it takes time to kind of like, see the impact. And I was like, you need some time, a place where you can grow, you can basically see people and you can apply your skills, but then also you see the impact of it. And I found out that the place where actually solves that equation is Dubai. It's literally Dubai. I think the vision of the leaders here again is actually they started early before I start early.
They
for
did,
real.
yeah.
So they started early in terms of really positioning the place as in the map, in the world map, let me say, right, in general. And I think with that, me coming here like 10 years ago and deciding that I'm going to call this place home 10 years ago was because I've seen that, hey, first of all, I belong here to the region. I'm Mediterranean myself, and actually, like, I speak the language and I know how to talk to the people and so on and so forth. But then also, it's a place where there are a lot of actually expats who are coming in, and I can still interact with so many different nationalities, so many different people with different backgrounds from all over the world. I'm not going to be really in a place where it's a closed kind of like, the mindset is a certain mindset that's actually not dynamic enough for me, right? So that was one of the criteria, and I found that actually definitely it goes in here. And then the second thing is, as I mentioned, the growth and the impact. I think the work that I have been able to do here and the impact that actually has been, I wouldn't been able to do it anywhere else. Thankfully, when I was in corporate, I was actually working in corporate, but I was leading, for example, very simple. I was leading the corporate women network, right? The corporate women network actually in GE and in Baker Hughes. And for twice, we got actually the award of the best D&I company in Middle East for the work that we did. And that tells you that, especially at the time, there was actually a lot of, I would say, space to do some work, right? And for it to be visible very easily, not only just basically to the people themselves, but to the corporations even themselves. And I'm so proud of actually the work that we have done. We were working on a return to career program, allowing women to actually come back. We were working on attraction with universities, as I mentioned, the program basically with Stanford for women in data science. We were working also actually on just the communities themselves, building the communities, for example, for entrepreneurs and for women in STEM and for women founders. This also was something that only lately we're seeing actually kind of like booming when it comes to that, right? 10 years ago, that was still something actually we did. We did a lot of work, for example, with Arab women in computing community, with Lean In from Facebook, a lot of work in terms of communities also that I have done. And I think, again, that's what got me into being top most influential is really the impact, is really seeing actually the work that we have done. I think all of this together kind of like I've seen that going forward, it will only continue and it will only kind of like be really kind of like, I would say, the pull and the attraction for more talent. And I was thinking, right, by 2017, UAE was appointing actually the first minister of AI in the world. And I think that is something what happened. Yes, we do kind of like, see things basically in both sides, right? What we can do more and what we already have, but I think it's very important that actually we celebrate where we are and we celebrate Dubai as is.
That is so true. Okay, so what I really like in your approach and what is good to hear as well, and I think the same by the way, is like it's like so many things are possible here because we are still in a sort of pioneer phase here compared to other markets that are a bit more saturated.
Correct.
So I understand this, but at the same time, I'm going to challenge this a bit because I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs here in the region, and what I hear, and you can tell me if you think it's true or not, is like many people when they start from scratch, they struggle finding support, like financial support, but as well support. In this country in general, they don't see it as like a very dynamic country to build a startup from scratch. It is different when it's like to build a sort of copycat from something that exists in another country. So I hear a lot of people actually going back to their country or going to other countries that are really trying to attract a talent, specifically in startups, want to be a hub for startups, etc. I see that changing here. But very recently, it's changing. There are a lot of communication about, like, for example, the creation of Hub 71 or all these places to attract talent in Dubai as well, the Dubai AI campus, etc. So many questions in one. But my first question is, first, do you think it's true? And as well, do you think people working in tech and AI have actually a big potential here, but for people working for other type of startups that are a bit less like
AI
innovative, or AI related, sorry. Are they on the side, or, you see what I mean? Is like, are they still considered, is it still a good place for them to build a company here?
Very good question. And I think it's important to actually address this. I would say it's important to address this statement. Everyone watching us actually might have this belief as well, whether they are here, whether they are building a startup, or they're actually outside, or they are maybe from
thinking
the
about
entrepreneurs.
coming, or
exactly, thinking about coming, or maybe the entrepreneurs who actually went back and they were like, what did I do wrong or something, or how can I learn from the experience as well,
exactly.
right? From that perspective, I think from my opinion, when it comes to that, and I have quite a strong opinion as well in this. I think every journey is an individual journey at the end of the day. So it's always something that your own circumstances, your own background, your own kind of like approach to how did you really went through entrepreneurship is what determines kind of like, at the end of it. But saying all of that, I think what's important in here is really, really building the network. A lot of people struggle when they come in here because they think the same, maybe they think the Silicon Valley way, which is, okay, let's get into a basement, let's kind of like just like get into ourselves, build the products, and then everyone's gonna know the product.
Yeah.
That's not the culture here. And that's exactly why it's important to kind of like, be quite kind of like, I would say, techie or kind of geeky from the cultural perspective. The cultural mindset here is very important. And then a lot of business, even actually do its tech business still, not just traditional business, it's built on the networks and it's built actually on who you know. And a little bit something as small as knowing the information or sharing the information, you wouldn't know that or you wouldn't get it unless you really have the right network in here. So I think this is what a lot of people actually miss it. When, as I mentioned, they come in with the same kind of like mindset, which is the mindset of Silicon Valley, which is just like, okay, let's be two founders or something closed on in each other. We get into the product, we sell it to our first contract, and in itself, the word of mouth is going to happen. That's not going to happen. That's one thing. The second thing I believe also is that it's very important also to understand the type of market and how the growth strategies usually actually go in here again. As an entrepreneur, and as you mentioned, whether it's an AI or outside of AI or so on, I think it's really important to actually understand the customer behavior here, whether you are B2B or B2C, whatever it is. And this is tied a little bit to the first point.
It's actually a big question because I was working on the side on sort of B2C projects before, and to be honest, it's a very, like, I understand that people can struggle to build B2C businesses here because the market is super small. In the UAE, I mean, we're not 20 million. It's quite small. Plus, it's very fragmented because you have many different nationalities, many different type of like consumptions behaviors, etc. So I guess there is a big question of like, I think B2B is maybe more interesting. That's a very personal point of view, and maybe B2C is a bit more challenging. Well, it doesn't mean that no one is building B2C. I mean, you see the Karims and etc. It's not true, but that's a big question as well. It's a market that can be challenging as well, just because this is how it's
fragmented. So many nationalities, and every nationality has its own language, has its own kind of like cultural behavior, and so on and so forth. Someone celebrating Eid, someone celebrating Christmas, someone
you can't do everything.
Exactly.
And not everyone has the same pattern, which is the amazing thing in Dubai. But when it comes to business and B2C, it can be very challenging.
I totally agree. And again, maybe I'm biased because I was always in B2B. I also prefer B2B actually because it's kind of like something that picks up really easily in here. But this doesn't mean that actually we're already seeing a lot of success stories in B2C. Of course. So
and all the ones that you mentioned, by the way, they're B2C.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So I believe that, again, this is why, again, in the beginning, I said every entrepreneur's journey is an individual journey. We cannot really kind of like just generalize by any means, but we're just trying to kind of like give pointers, right, to the people for them actually to enhance their journey and to really have something solid out of it. I think this is why, so as I mentioned, this is why it's important to understand the customer behavior here, understand who you're talking to, what's basically their, again, anything that you do in your market research, you just needed to do it for your ICP and to have it for the region. You mentioned something very important, which is on copy pasting and how this is usually a trend that actually work or gets the support easily or so on. I think it's related to the maturity of the ecosystem. The ecosystem when actually it's just starting, it starts by copy pasting. That's how any ecosystem really gets built in, right? They see something actually that's already working somewhere. Let's copy paste it. Let's not reinvent the wheel. We just basically, even the product maybe get it actually white label it or something like that or whatever it is, which is fine. Which is like, to get your foot in the door is basically something, this is how you start. But then as the ecosystem grows, you start seeing basically where exactly the value of innovation is. And I think this is where the governments in the region here are really kind of like doubling on as of
Yes.
now. And they're partnering with big companies as well for that. We're seeing actually investments are crazy investments coming in. Microsoft has just invested 1.5 billion into actually the upskilling as well through G42. Oracle as well did the same. Google is basically partnering with Saudi as well for cloud infrastructure and basically for also upskilling the talent. And those are all kind of like 1 billion plus investments. These are not kind of like
It's
small
huge.
investments. And if these companies are seeing potential and are supporting the governments in upskilling the talent in here in the region, this means that the region will grow to something meaningful and to something basically that will have, I would say, positioning in the world very, very soon. And I think this is exactly the right approach for it. For it to be sustainable, we need to have the local talent. We cannot kind of like keep just kind of like, I would say, depending on the people who went to and studied in the US, and I'm one of them, but still, like we don't, we don't.
No, but you start from
we cannot keep doing that, like exactly. So it has to be sustainable. For it to be sustainable, it has to be local, and then for that, I think the knowledge or the tech talent and the tech basically aspect of it, just upskilling in itself is so important. And I think that is going with time. This way founders can hire very easily and can hire people who also are already kind of like embedded within the culture, right? And embedded within the market, and they know the market and so on and so forth, which makes their businesses very easily, way easier. So I think those are the main points where any founder or any entrepreneur is important to actually, like, when they come in and kind of like put in mind. B2B versus B2C, as we mentioned, the support from the government in terms of, are you a copy paste or do you have a success story, or you're starting from scratch, and then also tapping into what exactly are you doing to support the visions. By the way, this is also important. Vision 2030, exactly, in Saudi, here as well in Dubai, in Oman. I mean, all the countries here in GCC, they have actually some specific goals and objectives that they are trying to achieve. And if your startup or basically any venture that you're building maps into one of these, you should definitely tap into it and basically speak loudly about it. Because that's how also you would be able to attract and align yourself, right, with all the programs and incentives and getting into the incubators, the semi-government incubators, and so on and so forth.
That's very interesting. And by the way, if I talk to the investor, Chada, and then we'll come back to the entrepreneur part, when you invest in a company, because you personally invest in companies here in the region, do you invest abroad or mainly here in the region?
Maybe mainly, yes.
Is this something you take into account, the fact that, I mean, you see more potential in the startups that are actually very close to like the 2030 plan or like the vision of the region? Is this something you take into account?
Great question. First of all, I invest in what basically I have expertise on, and I can add value on. So anything basically that is SaaS, AI, energy tech, where I believe that either my network or my expertise or something basically can really add value and kind of like boost the startup. Otherwise, I wouldn't kind of like put the money in a place where it's not really smart money. Like, right, we have this basically that we call it smart money. So I really like that.
I mean, it's good news that you actually look into this, but
absolutely. So that's one thing. The second thing, as you mentioned, is very important. If you're coming to the region, I have basically like, one of the startups in my portfolio from the UK. They came in here to the region. They want to expand, and they're really kind of like, trying to adapt to the region. And really what I like about the founder is like he keeps asking questions about the culture, and he keeps asking questions about the customers, because he is B2C. So like he really wants to kind of like understand it first before putting a foot actually just in there for the sake of it, right? So they're not seeing it actually just as a market, but they're seeing it as a market. What's the impact that I can make again? And then that impact, is it actually aligned, as we mentioned, with the vision of the governments and basically with the with objectives in there or not, right? So this is really important. Of course, with all the financial metrics that actually are needed to be there. And then do you have all your data raw material in place?
This is a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. I mean, I hope you do it smartly, but I mean, it's interesting to see in what you personally believe. Like, what are the key sectors that you think are going to boom here in the region? I get you don't only invest in the sector, you invest in founders, etc. But like, you actually invest in SaaS, tech. I mean, everything that you and you see it has a potential here.
Absolutely. I mean, again, I might be biased here, and I'm fine being biased about it.
Yeah, that's what is interesting. We are all biased.
Exactly, right? So I believe that the region will continue being number one player when it comes to energy, like with all the bigs that we have, and also the interesting kind of, I would say, sources of energy, but then also the talent that we have in energy and so on. So energy is really big, and in all that renewable energy, traditional energy, gas, I mean hydrogen, all of this. Basically, I think it's really important and will continue to be important in the region. So that's something I basically do in. Education is so big for me, and throughout my career, I tried as much as I can to kind of like reinforce this, especially in Middle East and Africa, and I believe that the transfer of knowledge, and that's basically, by the way, this is our slogan in Algeria, like Badvag is like, we create opportunities, we bring home expertise. And we bring home expertise is again about all the upskilling and the knowledge and really the education in place, right? So education is really big to me. I mean, I invest again in EduTech a lot in that aspect. And sustainability, of course, sustainability, I think that that is something that is a responsibility for all of us. And I know it's debatable. A lot of people basically say profit or impact, profit or sustainability, and so on and so forth. I believe it's really kind of like an obligation for us as well as investors and so on to kind of like that. And then first and foremost, again, back to really having more women investors so that we can have more women founders. I mean, we do have the statistics, and unfortunately, it's shameful that only 2% of all basically the money VC goes to female founders. And I believe that we cannot push for more money to go to female founders and having that perspective coming up in the boardrooms and as female CEOs and as female executives if we do not have the money and the female money also actually in place, right? And this is exactly what we do, for example, for Women Collective. So actually what we do in Women Collective is like...
Can you explain what Women Collective here?
Absolutely, of course. So Women Collective is, we're more than 150 female investors here in the region. And what we do is specifically, we actually work with female investors, female executives and so on, as in fractional investment. So basically we discuss or we negotiate with certain founders about kind of like, how are we going to participate in the round. We get some preferred, I would say, preferred positioning for our female investors, sometimes like 50% of the valuation for them or something like that. And that when we get a stake, we have it throughout all our 150 million. So instead of them, like the minimum would be in a certain startup, let's say, for example, like, 50K is the minimum ticket that actually they accept. We would get that 50K, and that 50K we actually distribute it through all the 150 if they want, or whoever wants to get in, right? So the concept here is that we're democratizing investment for female investors. This way, we could have more people joining, but then also more expertise being shared, more women again in the cap tables, more women are actually seeing how the dynamic of like startup investor actually goes in, and then we are providing a platform for them to actually build up their portfolio so that tomorrow when they are an angel investor, they can actually invest their own money in kind of like, bigger and bigger checks going forward as well. So this concept of democratizing investments is very, very important. And I would say like, a shout out to my friend Anna, who's actually leading all of this. And she's the one who actually got the idea in that aspect from that perspective. And she's in Shark Tank, Pakistan and so on. So she got a really actually like good experience from that perspective. And what I really like about that again is that we're not only actually like saying that we support female founders, but we really, really focus on the other side of the game, which is supporting female investors first. Because again, if we don't have basically the push from that side, it's very hard to actually see the push like on the other end of the side, right? So I said that's basically something again I think is super important as well, is to support the diversity. And I'm a big believer in that. I mean, again, we have statistics that actually like boardrooms who are diversified are way more productive and way more profitable actually than just having a boardroom which one ethnicity or one gender or whatever it is basically in that aspect. So it's very important to have that pollination, I call it, of perspectives and of ideas and of basically backgrounds as well in business, right? So this is why we've done Women Collective and we've done all of those initiatives. And I think, again, I call in people to join us and to do more of that as well, as much as you can, whatever you are.
Yeah, of course. How do you explain this figure of 2% of female founders here in the region? I know, I mean, it's a topic everywhere in the world anyway, but on this, in the region here, the figure is really, I mean, it's very small. So there is this investment question, but other topics as well. Did you see the situation evolve say yes, please. Did you see it evolve these last couple of years? And how do you explain that we have such a low number of women building their own companies or even working in tech here in the region?
Okay, so I'm not only gonna say yes, but I'm gonna tell you something actually that will make you happy even more.
Please do.
Which is, in the region, we're actually above the average, the worldwide average in terms of actually people in STEM or women in STEM.
Okay.
In terms of education, that actually is higher than the average. I believe it's around 34% or something. I'll get you the right number afterwards. But actually in the region, when it comes to women in STEM and education, we're higher than the global average, the worldwide average or the international average for that. Now, where the gap comes actually in the corporates and entrepreneurs and so on. So when they move to the professional world, we see that gap actually coming out.
Because where do they go?
Yeah, exactly. So they go into education. They're really excited about education and so on. And then when they get basically the education, they're like, okay, I'm fine.
Yeah, okay.
You see what I'm saying? And I think it's a couple of things. It's not just actually one thing. I believe, of course, things are getting better. And again, we're seeing so many role models in that aspect. The Ministry of Entrepreneurship, the Minister of Entrepreneurship here in UAE is a female.
Yeah.
And we are so proud of her. She is also an entrepreneur, actually, Her Excellency as well. And it's so good to see basically more and more examples. And I always go back into the fact that we really need more role models.
Yeah.
You cannot imagine, Margaret, how like when I deal with women. I was in GCC, right, in GCC, Morocco, and we did actually a panel about female entrepreneurs in Africa. And as I finished the panel, when I finished, like so many ladies came into me and they were like, "Hey, we are so much inspired just by listening to you."
Yeah.
And I wouldn't imagine that thing or that like 20 minutes panel would have that much impact just because they listen to something or they listen to a story or they know that actually this is possible and they can just follow the path of someone that they relate to. Especially that someone they relate to, they're like them, they're coming from the same kind of like background, the same kind of like, society where they came in. And I think this is something that we need to do more of. We need to show more of our role models. They are there.
Yeah, they are.
They're not visible.
Yeah.
That's
and
what
the
I
more
believe.
and that's why you're here, by the way, but like the more you show these women, the more people will be like, oh, I look like her, I can relate. And like, this is possible. So I can do it myself.
Exactly.
And I agree, it's super important. So this is one first very important thing. Yeah.
And I think, again, the imposter syndrome actually in women.
That's the main reason.
Exactly.
No, the men don't need role model.
Yes, exactly. And we see this in corporate.
But yeah, it's very, very,
It's known everywhere. That's exactly something where, unfortunately, it's just sometimes you just like feel that actually they lack really the boost of confidence, nothing more. They have all the knowledge.
Of course, it's not about education or knowledge or being smart or anything, but it's about, that's why I have this question. I mean, in my previous company, it was a big challenge. It was about, okay, how do we first make sure that people, like that women see our job offerings first, that they have access to it, and then that they feel capable to like send their CVs and they feel legitimate, and that they join because it's they join because they see only men in this company, so they be like, it's not for me. And then how do you retain them so they stay in the company? It's such a big challenge, and most of the time it's all about the fact that they feel they are women. I mean, I put myself into it as well, but like they are women, so they feel they are not capable if no 100%. One shows them or tell them, of course you can do it, I'll push you, you go.
Exactly, 100%. You are absolutely right. And I think this is something actually what I personally also worked on when I was actually leading the Corporate Women Network in Baker Hughes, which is on how can we just like make sure that we're attracting women, we're actually retaining them, and then we're working on promoting them. Throughout the pipeline, you really see that actually the common theme is the imposter syndrome. It's like, hey, that job description that you talked about, you know that men, they only see actually 60 to 70% of the criteria. And they were like, if they match 60, 70% of the criteria, they would apply. But women, no. They were 100%. Like, okay, exactly. I know. I need to be 100%, otherwise I'm not going to go there.
But then what?
Self-sabotaging.
Of course, which is a big But then in this region, what is being done? So the investment part, I think, is really interesting. Thank you for sharing this, and it's a great thing. By the way, you were talking as well a lot about building communities, building networks. I know you personally launched and really like you are involved in all of this. So what are the things that are being done around you to support women into this?
I think, as you mentioned, Marcos, you're absolutely stop. First of all, I always actually tap into the power of communities. So please see what kind of community actually speaks best for you as a person, right? You could connect with them. You could kind of like, find yourself there, find yourself growing, learning something, being able to also give, by the way. And this is also important. I believe women are by nature givers, and they reinvest, by the way, most of actually their wealth, or basically their earnings, into their families. So it's important for them also to kind of like, be in a place or an environment where they're able to give. So search for this community where actually you find yourself, you're a giver, you're actually learning, you find people you connect to, they speak to your ambition, they speak to where you are, and then try to build something together. Building alone is scary. And I know that is this the kind of like scare of failure is sometimes like, just gets into the women, especially the women, they feel the pressure of like, I need to prove myself everywhere I am. And entrepreneurship, unfortunately, this doesn't actually like, work for it. You have to fail. Like in entrepreneurship, you have to fail. There's no escape actually from it. And I think what actually makes it better for women, or what's being actually done in that aspect, I think it's just try to build together. We had some communities where literally what we were doing is actually kind of like, sit together, just kind of like, build an app or something. Try to kind of like go through the process. And as you talk through it, it kind of like the anxiety goes down. And when that anxiety goes down, you kind of like build again more confidence for you to actually do something bigger and bigger afterwards. That's from that perspective. I think what's also being done is that I really see the universities now like, tapping into that even more and more. They're literally actually reaching out to the corporations and saying, what can we do more for our women? How can we support them more? How can we get them to actually go out there and kind of like be able to actually have and speak in those conferences, participate in those conferences, do those exchange programs even, by the way. Exchange is very important. Again, what we said, the pollination of ideas and like the exchange of ideas, and really the fact that someone is sharing this and the other one's sharing that, it really builds up the perspective about actually what's happening and where exactly they can play a role in the puzzle, let me say, of the ecosystem, right? So I think this is very important. And what's even more and more important, as you mentioned, as we said, is that okay, it's not just about the knowledge. You can go to YouTube. You can actually subscribe to any of the 1 million initiative for prompt engineering, for example, that actually UAE is having. There's so many initiatives for knowledge perspective. But at the end, I think what actually the move is for us to have more female founders programs and female kind of like, I would say perspective. There are a lot of women business councils in here as well in UAE, and I think they're very active from that perspective. But I believe for young entrepreneurs, what we need to do is actually we need to see more of incubation programs for them as well, dedicated, just the same way we have some incubation programs that actually are very dedicated to energy tech or something like
topics,
that. Exactly, to some topic. I think we definitely, this is a call out for all the incubators and the accelerators in here in the region, the Innovation Hub. Please do more of that. So that's something I think is super, super important, because again, as I mentioned, the female founder by nature, they kind of like thrive in communities, and they thrive actually more in terms of
that's
like
a good point.
Where they see basically each other, they are being actually kind of like doing something together. So we need to tap into it so that actually they can see the help and the support there.
It's very interesting because indeed, like it's important to put all these women together to show them role models, etc. But at the same time, I still believe that like the success will come from men and women in the same room, you know?
Yes,
but you still need to go through this phase of like pushing women to go together, like helping them, show them the way, etc. But then, it has to be like a common work.
100%. I was just talking about this perspective from women being received, but it's absolutely a collective work and collaborative work. I always say, like, we're not going to do anything if we talk to ourselves in the room. No. If we keep talking to ourselves, then it's just like women to women. Yes, it's important. We need to do it, but then we're not the only one who is actually here in the in the universe. And it's always a collective work, and it's always something that actually our men allies. I personally would not have been able to do anything of my career journey if not for the support of my amazing father and my grandfather and all the men in my life. Right? Same thing for my bosses, my mentors. Actually, if you count them, my mentors are like more men than women. Maybe like you see. So again, same thing. When I was actually leading the corporate women network in both GE and bakeries, we had some amazing support from our male leaders. Like literally our CEO, from the CEO to the VPs to everyone in that perspective. If not for their involvement and their belief that yes, this is something that actually we really need. This is something we're seeing the value at. This is something that we want to invest time and effort and money on it. Then we wouldn't really be able to do anything at the end of the day.
Yeah,
I think it's just kind of like, for me, it goes without saying, but I don't know, for some people, they see it like, as an exclusive kind of like, we're excluding one another. It's absolutely not. We need both. And for us to kind of like empower both to kind of like be in the right position, in the right kind of like, field or whatever it is, again, we also need both efforts and both types of perspectives.
And on your side personally, like, did you face any challenges in your either startup journey or investor journey? Because you were a woman, or like, was it sometimes a limitation for you or an opportunity actually here in the region?
Very good question. I think, again, when it comes to challenges and failures, a lot of people do, and it's.
I'm sure like, you had a lot. I mean, because everyone has, like, but where you felt that it was either limiting you or that because you were a woman, you had some limitation, or because on my side, I felt that sometimes I had limitation, but sometimes it was such a big opportunity in 100%. The UAE to be like a female leader. 100%. So that's why I'm asking, like, you could have both sides of the stories.
Got you. Now I understand. I think for me, it was absolutely, like, I'm not going to lie.Maybe I was actually in an unfortunate position or something. I've never felt that I'm actually being kind of like hindered from an opportunity or something just because I'm a woman.
Okay, good news.
I've never felt that way, literally. I mean, yes, I kind of like felt it for some other reasons maybe, but not because I'm a woman. On the contrary, as you mentioned, is I feel more support because I'm actually a woman. And again, whether this is in the entrepreneurship journey or in the corporate journey, by the way. So on both sides, I received more support here in the region for that than actually like, being seeing it as kind of like, an obstacle, let me say. And I think that's, again, something a lot of people actually don't realize. They think that here in the region, there are more kind of like, there are more stereotypes about kind of like you being a woman cannot do anything.
Yeah, it's one of the big cliche that I get every time I go back to Europe. It's like, that, can you even drive? And I'm like, oh, come on, stop.
Thank you. You are European, So for me, I'm like, hey, we don't even ask this question. Like, literally, for us, it's actually, we're fortunate that, we're women in this region, because we literally get like, way more support than actually where we get it actually after, outside. So I think this is important to clarify it and to put it out there. And I think it's something cultural, by the way. It's something actually like comes to the part of the culture of the region, also the Middle East region. That's like women are respected, and women kind of like are as much as you can. You make it easy for her, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So that's basically from the perspective of our men in the region. That's how they think about it. And I think they just kind of like bring that concept to apply it wherever they can actually. As much
including
as,
in the business. So
exactly,
that's right.
Exactly. Yes.
Very interesting. We were talking about investments, and I was thinking, look, because we tackled the myths one by one about entrepreneurship, women in the region. There is one thing that I hear a lot, that is that it's very difficult here to raise funds. So to find money when you start your business. You're on both sides because you invest and you probably need money sometimes as well for your projects, I believe. So what do you think about this? Is it true? Is it only true for certain type of businesses? Is there really like, because there are a lot of announcements about huge budgets in this region for AI, for startups, etc. Is this allocated somewhere? Like, is it really a challenge, or it's a big myth?
Good question. So as you mentioned,
be transparent.
I like the note. I like the FYI. No, I mean, look, again, at the end of the day, fundraising is like one of the toughest.
Yes, in general, anyway.
Exactly. One of the toughest, like, tasks that any entrepreneur has to go to. And it doesn't matter your experience, it doesn't matter basically who you are, it doesn't matter where you are, in which region,
of course.
It's always tough going out there and asking for money and convincing people that, hey, your business is going to be worth like, 10x tomorrow and invest with me now so that actually we can get it, right? So that's in general. I think basically putting that out there, that actually it's in general and hard. I think also the fact that the region is not kind of like, is not something that's actually completely taken out of the global context also, right? I mean, the VC money in general goes with ups and downs in terms of cycles. And we've seen actually during COVID, for example, like everyone was throwing money left and right? But then afterwards, it just like got into a draft, like, everyone was like keeping into their pockets. So that's something that actually the region does follow a little bit in that aspect in terms of actually the global trend. But then also, again, I believe that because the region, and I think again, this is something actually everywhere in the world, it depends on the network, and it depends basically on that. I also fundraise, and I fundraise from LPs, and I fundraise also for our own startups, which actually are there. So I talk to a lot of those people, right, and family offices and so on. I think what we're seeing in here in the region that actually again is growing is that family offices, for example, are getting more and more interested in tech, which wasn't the case before.
Okay.
And that's something basically very well presented. I think governments prefer, of course, second-time managers, second-time entrepreneurs, and those people who actually proved success already. Because again, it's like governmental money, so you understand
Less
that
risks,
they want to go things bigger, scalar, and so on and so on and so forth. And VCs, they really kind of have their own thesis statement, and they want to focus on a certain area, and they are more kind of is this going to be unicorn or not? Again, they put money in so many things. They know that actually they're gonna just bet on 2 or 3 out of all basically what they put together. So they're trying as much as they can to kind of minimize the risk, right? And personally, I don't see it different from anywhere in the world. Again, I lived in the US, I lived in Europe, and I'm familiar with Africa as well, and now being here in UAE, I don't see that much of differences. I think it's difficult. It's by nature difficult, and this is how it's supposed to be. This is why not everyone is an entrepreneur, you know? This is why it comes in time. I think it's just one thing in the region is that you need to see what's basically the trend really in the region, I think. And what I mentioned, for example, about the family offices that actually they're getting, and it's a trend actually. This is now the time to go and speak, not only to VCs, but to family offices. If you're doing something in AI or tech, a lot of family offices are traditional businesses, and they want to get into the hype of AI, and they don't know how, right? If you come in with a very good idea, with something actually that's very strong and all, you need to know who to convince. I think that's the thing. You need to know who to convince. And it's true sometimes, yes, seeing all of these announcements, it's very difficult to know where to go. Yeah. Right? You say, oh, there's this 1 billion fund in here being announced, let me go to talk to them, and they shut you down from the very beginning. But the real thing is that, are you really seeing again the trend? Are you being visionary here and knowing who to talk to or not? And I think this is something that actually us entrepreneurs in the region lack sometimes. It's we don't see the trend, and we just follow what's actually outside in the announcements. But the announcements again are not sometimes something usually reflective of what's actually really happening.
Communication strategy.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not really reflective. Okay. So I think this is very, very important. And I think the other thing also is you mentioned this already. You said it depends on sectors and so on, depends on founders and teams and all. But all in all, I think as much as you can minimize the no's, you're getting closer to the yes.
Yeah.
And you get to minimize the no's by having a strong team, by having the traction, by having the MVP, and so on and so forth. And if you can get actually one check from outside the region, you'll be able to get more also. That's something I have seen. And
I heard that a lot.
Yeah. I've also seen actually that's something that is there. So if you're able to mix it out from globally, then why not? It's not something that you need to kind of just have your I would say your mindset that, oh no, I am a startup from the region, I only need to fundraise from the region. No, you don't really need to just fundraise from the region. Okay. Just go wherever actually the globe is. And if you are, and as I mentioned, I've seen this, if you are able to get a check from outside, then actually it's just gonna makes it easier. And here, people like to follow and don't like to take the lead in the risks. That's the thing.
Yeah, but again, that's understandable.
I agree.
Yeah. And what about Saudi Arabia? So you know pretty well the region, and you've been working as well with Saudi quite a lot. What's your point of view on the entrepreneur ecosystem there? Is it as dynamic as it says it is, or as it says it's becoming? Do you see any specific potential? Would you build a company there, or you think it's too early? What do you think?
I think, again, I say this all the time, and I keep saying it. I'm so impressed with Vision 2030 in Saudi.
I agree.
What's happening over there is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's something, we just basically, I think, even when they first announced it, we didn't believe that this is kind of like, get into the route and the path
Yeah,
into
but they're going there.
execution.
Yes, yes,
But
yes.
then, like, only 5-10 years after kind of
Yeah.
like, the announcement, things are really moving
Yeah.
towards that direction, and things are happening, and the change, you could see it as well. So I'm really, really impressed with that.
Yeah.
When I first came in the region, I was basically kind of like, debating where I go to UAE in Saudi, and kind of like, for people was like, this is an easy choice. Why are you kind of like debating? But then now I see a lot of talent
Yes.
actually go to Saudi, like, very easily. Why? Because again, it's basically the growth potential in there. And I believe the fact that Saudi is a big market, 40 million in there, GDP is now, again, Aramco is like, the biggest country, the biggest when it comes to energy. And it's just the fact that if you diversify your economy as a state, and you're attracting the talent the right way, you're really going to get something at the end of the day. It's 1 + 1 = 2 at the end. Yes, okay, you're gonna miss like here and there from that perspective. People are saying maybe why Neom is being scaled back or whatever, some of these stuff. But then at the end of the day, I really believe that the growth that Saudi is going through is just like phenomenal. It's something like we've never seen before. And even people, again, in Europe and the US are kind of like, seeing this as an example now in terms of like, how do you really go through building that economy or tech hub, also an epicenter, right?
Yeah.
Of entrepreneurship and tech, basically, in a certain region, the right manner it is. So that's from one side. I worked with Saudi before from corporate perspective as well. Actually, we were supporting women, and we were supporting building a tech hub actually in Saudi, and the talent is just amazing. The talent is very eager to learn.
Yes, and to work.
Exactly. The eagerness is actually really kind of like, where you see it in their eyes, and like, that's something, I want to acquire. I want to kind of like know about that topic more and more. I want to basically contribute to the success of my country. And I think, again, this is translating into the entrepreneurship scene. And we've seen exits now in Saudi, the exits within Saudi in itself. We have actually unicorns that actually are really great when it comes to that. And I think it's just going to continue growing. And I'm very, 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 very hopeful and optimistic about actually where Saudi is going.
Amazing. Yeah, because as a market, whatever your business is, but if you're based here as a market, going to Saudi is really a no-brainer. But indeed, I think 10 years ago, the question of building a company between Dubai and Saudi was quite simple, but I think people now, now it's actually
100%,
a big question.
100%, exactly. I mean, if you want to be in the wave, then you would go into Saudi, and you want to grow with it as well, then basically you'd be in the right place, definitely.
Interesting.
Definitely.
What would you say to someone, like I met someone recently who chose to, who grew up in Dubai,
Okay.
studied in Dubai or probably Dubai or the US, I'm not sure, and then wanted to build a company here, but it was like a few years ago, but went back to the US and did it in the US because he was like, I don't think it's interesting to come here, etc. So you explained a lot the reasons that made you actually build a company here. What would you say to someone who lives in another country, so let's say in the US or in Europe, because you know these markets, to convince them that, and let's say they work in tech, to convince them that this is the place you should actually build your tech startup in?
I think
women or not, we don't mind.
Yeah, of course. This one is in general. I believe, look, again, what we're talking about here, we're talking about future, we're talking about growth, we're talking about basically being visionary and seeing the potential in the right place, right? And being here in the region is something that you are seeing yourself growing 10x more if you are in Europe or in the US. And that's exactly it. I was literally yesterday, I'm coming now from Doha from Web Summit in Qatar, and I've met a lot of VCs actually coming from Singapore, from the US, bringing their companies with them, and they are actually expanding and scaling here in the region. And I was like, wow, you guys, okay, you're in the US, you're already a company in the US, you're in Series B and so on. Why would you come to the region? I asked the same question, right? And he was like, I think growth here is incomparable.
Yes.
And the opportunity of basically penetrating the market with proven technology, with basically also expertise that's actually, most of them, again, they're second-time founders and so on, exit founders, but with their expertise, and they come in here it's going to be something very much appreciated. And as they partner with the local talent or the local governments, the benefits are double for both. It's win-win situation, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is something that any entrepreneur, they're hearing us actually in Europe again or in US, and they want to accelerate their growth and double digit their growth. I think they definitely should come actually should think about actually coming here to Dubai.
Yeah.
Or to
And as
Saudi
you
or to
said,
the
there
region.
is one thing that I think is very important, correct me if I'm wrong, is that network is key. And if you build a company here and you're right from Europe or Singapore or the US and you're like, yeah, this is a market that's growing, it's going to work, be very careful as well. It's like partner with local talents, partner with
100%.
local partners, with local companies, because
100%.
this is a very different market. And you will need to have support from people who understand the people and who understand the market, who have the right connection. And I think without this, it can be a bit of a struggle.
100%. You're absolutely right. And this is what we said in the beginning also, by the way.
Yeah.
We said that this is important, that actually you understand the market, you understand the people you're talking to and so on. And as you do that, you need the right talent, actually the local talent in here. And this is why we touched on all the local basically initiatives, right, that the government is doing actually for upskilling and tech. I think it's in parallel. You cannot kind of like just also export the talent and keep exporting it, as we mentioned in the beginning, and say that I'm going to build something solid and sustainable. That doesn't go that way. You have to partner with the right people, as you mentioned, the right university, the right talent, the right government entities, and so on, and also tap into the initiatives which are already there. Again, we mentioned that big tech companies are actually investing very heavily here in the region with these initiatives and so on. So it's important to tap into that as well and be part of the wave, I would say.
Yeah, very interesting. And just to close the discussion, I have usually asked like a key takeaway, but specifically today I wanted to ask you to what will be your advice to a female, to a woman who wants to try entrepreneurship, to build their own company, but who's like, has legitimacy. I mean, I meet so many like that are still in corporate that are like, I see there is growth. I think there is potential. What would you tell her, like to go, just to go? Because many still females see that a big lack of role model. So what would you say to these females?
I totally agree. I like this question. And I like that you changed it from here.
Yeah, because I think it's very specific.
Definitely. I think, look, let's be realistic also, and let's be kind of like, talk people heart to heart.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah. I was not expecting you to say, I would like to say like, go, it's gonna be amazing.
Exactly.
It's of course
Exactly.
but
it's difficult
because they don't have role model. I think it's important to say it's difficult, but it's possible.
Yes, definitely it's possible. And this is actually we do it. And I think really actually for me, for example, personally, I speak about my story. When I took the leap, everyone was like, Chada, are you crazy? My family, my boss, my mentors, literally was like, why? You have an amazing job. You're like, multinational company, director
Why this
level.
risk? Yeah.
Exactly. Why taking the risk, right?
Yeah.
And I think for me it's something basically that I owe it to myself to kind of like, just take the option. And it's important to have the self-consciousness first. And I think for every female, really, actually, it's important for you to have this self-consciousness and the self kind of like evaluation first of who you are and what risk you can take or not. We don't want you to also throw yourself, just like go for being an entrepreneur and kind of like, be tomorrow in the streets and not having what to eat, This is not actually what we're calling people to do. I mean, again, I know the cliche about podcasts that, hey, we kind of like just kind of like encourage people crazily, but no, that's not what we want.
No.
We're trying to say that the opportunity is there, but you need to be humble with yourself and be true to yourself, right? Know who you are. Know what your capacities are. Know what you're okay with, know what you're not okay with, know your level of acceptance for your situation first, and build around it. I know a lot of people who are still in corporate, for example, and they're building something on the side.
Yeah.
For them, it's like, I will work on it on weekends. Whether it works or not, that's actually, again, what we said at the very beginning, it's an individual journey. Every entrepreneur has their own individual journey, and we can never, ever generalize or have one rule for everyone or something. What works for me doesn't work for you. What works for you doesn't work for me, right?
Yeah.
And who is the right person to know who works for them? It's yourself.
Yeah.
No one else. Yes, you listen to us, you listen to your mentors, you read the books, you hear the podcast, but at the end of the day, it's you who makes you, no one else.
Yeah.
So this is really important that you have that level of self-consciousness, right? First of all, it is difficult. It is not easy. I mean, I did it scared. Yes, I'm not gonna say I did it, but like it was just wow. Of course, I was scared, but then I did it while being scared. But I had that level of like planning, of self understanding. I was like, okay, I am okay with having that much of savings for that much of time to actually make the leap. I am that getting into entrepreneurship in this level or this field is not gonna really be me. So let's not go there, even though it's a trend, for example. But I'm gonna go to the place actually where my expertise and my kind of like talents and capabilities and network will kind of like expedite kind of like the traction. For example, it's really important to know yourself first. That's kind of like what I would be my advice. It's not about you being let's go, let's do it, let's do. If you need to basically take a step back and pause and just take it slowly, and that's who you are as an entrepreneur, do it that way. It's totally fine. It's, again, your individual journey. It's just that you need to believe in yourself. You really need to, that imposter syndrome, we need to see less of it, by the way, guys. So, or girls, let me say, I really mean, we really need to see less of it. And to all the role models, as you mentioned, please speak out. Please
that's what I was
there.
going to say. Speak out, and then all the others, go to events, network, meet people, ask questions, get inspired.
Get inspired.
And I
100%.
think that will be the...
Get inspired. I mean, just you being like exchanging the energy and talking to the people. You don't believe how much like, Margaret, just myself also speaking to people, I get energy from them.
That's why I do that.
Exactly, right? Exactly. It's so important sometimes, like just like one discussion, how it lightens up your mind or your idea for something, whatever. So please talk to people. Exactly. Talk to people, know yourself, and then you're going to be great.
Thank you so much, Chada, again, for all these insights, for the inspiration. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of entrepreneurs, but as well women in general, and people navigating in the world of startups here or wanting to invest. And as well, it's going to inspire your role models to speak out and to inspire other people, not only women, by the way, but other entrepreneurs. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Interesting.
It was a pleasure. It was really great. I loved it.
Thank you.